Deliver me away from the madness. I need somewhere safe to hide. Take care of me, protect me from sadness. Guide my steps into the light. Wake me up to see the beauty of gladness and the fact that I'm alive. Deliver me away from this madness. Ease my soul and heal my mind. Deliver me away from the madness. I need somewhere safe to hide. Take care of me, protect me from sadness.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of other participants to join, so just bear with us. And we'll have a welcome from the board chairman, Kris Butler. And after that, I'll say a few words about housekeeping, and then we'll crack on with our substantive discussion today. I believe Kris has just joined us. Video is just starting, audio is connected, and you're there from the ICMP boardroom. Kris, welcome, good to see you.
Thank you, Johnny. Technology, don't you love it? So we're all here, I think. Welcome. On behalf of ICMP, we have a global audience here today, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This has been a really popular autumn series, not least because of the relevance of the topics and the sheer quality of the panels and the contributors. So as always, thank you in advance to all of you for prepping and giving us your time today. We're certainly keeping the bar high. Today is a discussion of the MLC and the future of music streaming in the USA. So this panel will be introduced shortly by Johnny, but it will thereafter be led by Danielle Aguirre, who will be coordinating the panelists. So I'm looking forward to a stimulating hour in the company of you all. Enjoy this webinar, and Johnny, over to you for some intros. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as Kris mentioned. Thank you very much indeed, Kris, for the welcome. Welcome to the third episode of the ICMP Digital Series. If we can't be together, then at least we can gather. This mini-series aims are really very simple, and that is to ensure that in the absence of our meeting, that ICMP is providing first-class information far and across our NMPAs and companies worldwide. Again, at the outset, I would like to express my thanks to the ICMP colleagues who have worked relentlessly on not just this series, but our normal huge lobby workload under the most testing of circumstances. They pack a real punch on behalf of ICMP members, and they can be proud of their talents as much as their temperaments. My thanks also to Martin Nedved and our colleagues at Studio Fontana, who kindly provided the music you've just been enjoying. That particular live stream was, of course, fully licensed, and we're grateful for your excellent creative work. Thank you very much to Studio Fontana. So a warm welcome to our audience today. Scrolling through the list here, it's great to see so many countries represented. I think the last time in our live streaming one, we had more than 50 countries represented, so something similar today. I'm seeing names not just from music publishing professionals, but colleagues from labels, artist organizations, societies, public authorities. So very much a warm welcome to each and every one of you. Context, today's topic is about the present and future of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, or the MLC, in the United States. The MLC is the outcome, of course, of the historic Music Modernization Act legislation, which in turn was the outcome of the successful work of so many in the US music industry in recent lobbying efforts. The MLC will be central to the future of digital music licensing, from licensing and data perspectives, but also from efficiency and quality angles. So none better than our panelists today to speak in great detail about the MLC itself. First of all, to our guests, we're delighted to have Kris Ahrend, Chief Executive Officer of the MLC. Kris and his team, of course, have been leading the charge in building the systems involved and to effectuate the MLC itself. We're looking very much forward to hearing from you today, Kris, about your work and the January launch. Welcome.
Thanks, Johnny. Great to be here.
Also, a big warm welcome to our other guest, Alisa Coleman. Alisa Coleman needs no introduction, but as MLC board chair, she will be at the spearheading this effort in the US. She's also a New York chapter president, of course, of the AIMP and chief operating officer of the ABKCO Music and Record Company when she has some spare time, which I'm doubtful she ever has. Alisa, great to see you again and a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure. Also like to introduce Bart Herbison. Bart is Executive Director, of course, of the National Songwriters Association International. He's been at the forefront of pushing for the protection of copyright and for advancing the Music Modernization Act, and of course is central to the work as a board director of the MLC also. Warm welcome to you, Bart. Glad to have you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kris Butler and ICMP for having us today.
Thanks, Bart. And of course to Danielle Aguirre. Danielle is Executive Vice President and General Counsel, of course, at our US National Association colleagues, the NMPA. She's also an MLC board member and at the forefront of defending music publishers' interests in the world's largest music market, for example, in pushing for the Music Modernization Act itself. No doubt all of you know a chapter and verse, but we'll be hearing more from Danielle, not just about that legislation and context, but about the MLC itself. You'll be glad to hear that Danielle will be steering traffic today. I'll be taking a back seat, and we will be managing some questions from our audience. With that in mind, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I would ask all of our attendees to please make a clear distinction between the chat box and the Q&A box. You can chat away in the chat box itself, both to yourselves individually or as a group. But if you wish to ask a question to the panel, please do use the specific Q&A box, which you should see in the center bottom of your screen. You can ask a question to the whole panel or to an individual. We would ask you to do that, and if you're doing it in written form, just introduce your name, your organization, and who you're addressing, if it's not the whole panel. Our team here in ICMP will seek to unmute questioners, so we will have live questions in audio, just to make the discussion more lively. If that doesn't work, we'll simply read out the questions as they appear. So please do use the box throughout the discussion. With that, over to you, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Music Modernization Act, or the MMA, which was a law passed here in the US back in October of 2018. It was really the first substantive change to US copyright law in over 25 years and really needed to help move copyright law forward and modernize it, bring it in line with how music was being distributed here in the United States. Today, we're going to focus on a specific title within that law that focused on the creation of a collective that would help administer Section 115 licenses. And Section 115 here in the United States is a statutory compulsory license that licenses the reproduction and distribution of musical works. Specifically, the collective that was created under the MMA licenses audio only, interactive streaming, and digital downloads. And so before I turn it over to Kris to give you a little more of an introduction to the collective itself, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how did we get here. Well, the MMA wasn't our first effort to pass law to modernize Section 115 of the Copyright Act. We, the music publishers, songwriters, and the digital services had first sat down back in 2006, honestly, pre my time here at NMPA, understanding that as music was moving from physical formats to digital distribution, the way that licensing worked under this statutory structure was not really going to work for the new digital world. Section 115 was and is today, still until January 1, when the collective takes over, a single work licensing structure. So you needed to obtain a statutory license for every work that you wanted to use, which seemed to work well enough when it was CDs or vinyl. And as we moved to digital distribution and platforms like Spotify were using, 20, 30 million works, it was clear that it was not going to be an efficient or effective way to license. we attempted to pass legislation in 2006. We attempted again in 2011. Really wasn't until 2017 that streaming was generating enough revenue that music publishers and songwriters realized that the inefficiencies in licensing were costing them a lot of money. A lot of royalty revenue was not flowing through that should be flowing to copyright owners. At the same time, the digital services realized that they could not properly license under the current statutory structure. And they were very concerned, and they should have been, because there were a lot of lawsuits about statutory liability for licensing improperly under Section 115. All of that paved the way for what Bart and I and Alisa liked to call at the time the grand compromise. The creation of a collective that would be put in the hands of copyright owners. We could govern, but the digital services who needed the license would fund the collective. And we sat down and we were able to create a statutory structure that provided enough benefits to all parties that the statute was able to move unanimously through our Congress and be signed by the president. And since the fall of 2018, the people here today have really been focused on trying to create and develop this new collective so that it'll be ready to be launched in January of next year. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kris, who of course is the CEO of the MLC, or the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and he'll give you a little bit more background about the collective, its purpose, and what it does. And so Kris, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks so much, Danielle. And I would like to be quick to point out, I joined the party late. I joined the MLC at the beginning of this year. So by the time I joined the company, Danielle and Alisa and others on the board had done a fantastic job of laying a really strong foundation for us to be able to then build the organization. And I think one of the hallmarks of everything that we have done, starting with the passage of the law, is the fact that so much of it has been consensus driven. The reason there are not many updates to the copyright law is because there are not many moments when such a broad group of stakeholders in our industry agree on a course of action that will lead to legislative change. And Danielle and Bart and Alisa and many others were instrumental in pulling that coalition together and really doing the hard work up front to get the law passed. And now we as an organization have the benefit of building on the shoulders of the work they've done, and continuing to leverage that widespread support to ultimately deliver success for our members. So to give you a bit of an overview of the organization, where we are, I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a deck that we put together, and that way you can look at something other than me for a few minutes. And it's going to get this set up. So I'll just ask Danielle, are you able to see the deck now?
Yes.
Great. So as Danielle explained, the MLC was created pursuant to the Music Modernization Act in 2018. And one way to describe what led to that is the fact that the Act sought to address the failure of digital audio services to effectively license and pay mechanicals to publishers and songwriters. The MLC will effectively become a clearinghouse sitting between those services and the folks entitled to receive the mechanicals. We will collect both data and the money paid by those services, match the musical works data and sound recording data in order to determine who gets paid what from that royalty pool that we collect. Perhaps taking it down one level, there are at least four significant things that the MLC is doing or will do. The first is establishing and maintaining a public database of musical works ownership information. The key innovation there is public. There's certainly been many private databases of musical works ownership information assembled throughout the years, but by law, our database must be publicly available. That means both that folks can search the database for free on a web type interface that will be launching relatively soon, but also have the ability to download all of the musical works data in bulk. And that's something that initially we'll do through a bulk download of a file but that we envision we will shift to more of an API type dynamic. So that's an exciting innovation. We will then administer the new blanket license that Danielle mentioned. That blanket license is available to digital audio services for their US operations. So the service doesn't have to be a US company, but the license only covers the US operations. We will then receive and match the sound recording usage data that those services provide us on a monthly basis with the musical works ownership data that we are maintaining in that public database. And those matches will then allow us to determine who receives the mechanical royalties that we've collected from those services. And we will distribute those royalties significantly to anyone entitled to receive mechanicals on those works that were exploited on the US services. And so that's why, in contrast to the limited geographic scope of the blanket license, again, it's only available to services operating in the US, we will be paying people throughout the world, whether they be publishers or administrators, CMOs or self-administered songwriters. So in that respect, the NLC will have global reach, but only on the payment side. On the right, things that we will not do, we get this question quite a bit. We will not replace your PRO. So whether you're a publisher or a writer and you currently collect performance royalties through a PRO or a CMO outside the US, we are not allowed to administer or collect performance royalties. So nothing related to performance royalties will change as a result of our joining the music ecosystem. Similarly, and this is a question that is more framed for a US audience, we will not replace Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange is a somewhat similar organization that administers digital performance royalties for sound recording owners. And then we will not be administering audiovisual licenses, mechanicals for physical products, or as I said a moment ago, any licenses covering ex-US uses. So in that way, a really good summary of the MLC is we're not replacing anyone, but we are going to provide a really important service around the digital audio mechanicals that previously was provided either directly by services or by other private companies in the market. And we're going to do that in a very centralized way. From an organizational standpoint, we'll be headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. A great location for us in the US because it has been for decades a hub of music publishing activity. Many music publishers are based here, many songwriters are based here, and many more travel here regularly for business. That said, we have team members today in a number of cities around the country, more than we had intended initially, because with COVID, many of our employees are working from wherever their homes were before COVID. Many of them will move to Nashville, but we will still have team members in Los Angeles, Miami, New York, and then we have several team members in London as well, including our head of international relations, Imi Chawla, whose primary focus will be on making sure we're connecting effectively with all of you here today. So know that we are thinking very, very intentionally about our international relations, and our members will be outside the US, and Indy will be leading those efforts. As you can see on the bottom right, we've hired more than 40 employees since January. We've largely done that remotely, which has been an interesting challenge. And all of our employees are working fully remotely today. One of the perhaps advantages to the timing for us of building our operations is that because we began building in earnest at the beginning of the year, and COVID really shut operations down in the United States at the beginning of March, much of what we have done from a remote posture from the outset. So unlike many of you in your organizations, we did not have to grapple with how to transition operations from a more traditional physical environment where people were going to an office to an environment where you're working remotely. We did that from scratch. Our path to full operations looks something like this at a high level. We have begun rolling out the user portal that our members will use to interact with us, to see their data, submit changes, submit new registrations, and then ultimately to see their royalty statements and royalty-related data. That rollout began in September at the end of the month, and as of today, we've invited almost 7,000 members to come in and set up user accounts and member profiles if we have not already done that for them. So we have a lot of onboarding activity taking place today. We also have begun efforts to help our members check their data. That began with an initiative called our Data Quality Initiative that I'll describe a couple slides down. We will begin administering the blanket license as of January 1st of this coming year, which is right around the corner. And then we'll begin receiving usage files from those digital services in February and in March, and that will set us up to begin sending out our first royalty statements later this spring. So we're well underway on that path to complete and full operations. And by next summer, certainly we expect to be fully operational in every respect. I mentioned the portal, and I'll just say a few words about that. The portal will be that primary interface for our members, both with us and with their data. And that is a pretty big undertaking for us to build that technology from scratch. So we're doing it in phases, or as is reflected here in versions. The first version that we've now launched is focused entirely on works registration, and then the basics of setting up user and member accounts and profiles. So at this point, if you've gotten access to the portal and you go on and look at it, you won't see anything about royalty statements because that is still under development and not necessary for next spring. But even since we launched that first version in September, we have launched a series of minor updates. We do that almost weekly now, and we're going to continue to add functionality, address any issues with the software as we go forward and bring more members into the process. So if you are thinking that you will want to be a member of the MLC because you collect your mechanicals in the US directly, we are ready to bring you through that process. And you can check out our membership page on our website to find out more about how to let us know that you're ready to start talking about that process. And I'll talk a little bit more about membership. I'll talk about that on the panel in a moment. Royalties will be the second part of our development process for the portal, and that will include the ability for members to view any unclaimed and unmatched activity that we accumulate so that they have full visibility into what we have not been able to pay and have the ability then to search for works or uses of their works themselves and claim those. That added level of transparency, we think, will be a great value in helping our members claim all of their activity and ensuring that our unmatched pool is as small as possible. And then in the future, we've got lots of ideas around how we can help provide greater analytics capabilities and data management capabilities for our members in the portal. Portal itself is a new technology. As I said, we've developed that from scratch in less than 12 months. It's a clean user interface. For those of you who've been in the industry a long time, you've no doubt come across a black screen with green font in your days. Those systems that look like they came out of a 1980s feature film. Many of us still operate with systems like that, but this technology is new and is not decades old, and that certainly will allow us to be nimble and update it frequently. And as you can see, it also works on your mobile devices, so whether you use a phone or an iPad, on whatever device you have, the portal will optimize the view for you on that device. Support is a really important part of what we're doing. We view ourselves ultimately as a service organization, and it's one of our guiding principles to always think of ourselves as being a service provider. So in October, almost a month ago, we launched our support team. They're available 12 hours a day. We list that based on Central Time, which is where Nashville, the time zone that Nashville is in. But with 12 hours a day of operations Monday through Friday, plus 8 hours a day on Saturday, we have pretty good availability for folks, certainly throughout the US and in Europe. And over time, we'll explore whether we need to have some overnight hours for the folks who are based in time zones further afield. But definitely, if you have questions or you want to reach out to us, we are available. And you can find out more about that on our website as well. Data quality initiative I mentioned, in very high level terms, it allows folks to compare any size sample of their data with our data. We then provide a discrepancy report that only shows where there are differences between our data. Many of you who manage data know that the challenge for data is often finding the needle in the haystack. And if the needle is a discrepancy, that can be a significant problem for you, and you may not even see it because it's lost in all the data you have. So the DQI at a really high level allows you to identify only those discrepancies, so you can focus on fixing or correcting the discrepancies where they matter and relate to payment issues. Since we launched that this summer, more than 300 companies and individuals have reached out to connect with us on participation. And through the people that have begun participating, we have already compared more than 14 million works. We're steadily approaching 15 million. So it's been a really effective tool thus far, and it's one that we expect will be of great benefit to members for as long as we operate. That need to compare your data with ours and identify discrepancies would be an ongoing value, we think, for members. And again, another way that we can deliver more transparency. And there is more information about the BQI on our website. We did some webinars earlier this summer that you can go ahead and watch if you're interested in learning more. So finally, from an action step perspective, on the off chance that any of you have friends who work in digital services who operate in the US, and they are asking me, what's this MLC thing? Please encourage them to reach out to us. We have reached out to well over 50 digital services since we began our outreach efforts early this year. And we are definitely connected with all of the largest digital services, but we want to make sure we connect with every digital audio service that operates in the US so that they understand the full scope of the obligations imposed by the law, the NMPA, on those services, and are prepared to interact effectively with us. That in turn will allow us to serve our members more effectively. From a membership perspective, for publishers, administrators, and CMOs, we certainly want to make sure that you're becoming a member. Though for publishers outside the US, we know that you have other options. You may have a partner today, a sub-publisher based in the US, and it's entirely possible that that sub-publisher will be collecting mechanicals in the US on your behalf. So the fact that you're a publisher doesn't automatically mean you need to become a member if you're based outside the US. Check with that US partner if you have one first to see if they'll be doing that for you. And then of course, you have the potential of working with some of the CMOs in your local territory to collect mechanicals as well as another option. But if you wish to connect with us directly, you can do that. We don't give any preferential treatment based on geography. Essentially, we treat all members equally. So if you're entitled to collect mechanicals and you wish to do that directly, you can become a member of the MLC, and we will happily work with you to make sure that you get paid properly. For songwriters, the message is somewhat similar. Songwriters have lots of opportunities to partner with folks who can handle their administrative tasks for them so that they can focus more on doing the thing that, of course, is what we all value, and that's making music. So if you're a songwriter working with a publisher or an administrator, if you're outside the US and you're partnered with a CMO, please look to them first to find out if they'll be collecting mechanicals from the MLC in the US on your behalf. If you self-administer and essentially act as your own publisher, you can become a member of the MLC. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back to Danielle, and hopefully that gives us a foundation for lots of additional discussion and questions.
Great, thanks, Kris. And I'm actually going to move now to Barton and Alisa because Kris has given a great background about what the MLC is and what it's doing. The law wouldn't have passed and the collective would not have been created unless there were real benefits to all of the parties. And so I think the next question is not just how do you become a member, but why? What's the benefit to songwriters and publishers of joining the MLC? And Bart, I think I'm going to turn to you first because it really does change how songwriters are involved with their mechanical royalties here in the US. And one of the missions of the MLC is to outreach to writers. And so why don't you talk a little bit about the benefits?
Oh, well, I'm going to expand the question a little bit and talk about the benefits also from the Music Modernization Act. The centerpiece is the MLC, and I'll cover those, but the Music Modernization Act, the most important thing it did was change the way both performance and mechanical royalties are set in the United States. On the mechanical side, it changed an outdated 1909 law. And on the performance side, it changed that portion of those antiquated 1941 Department of Justice consent decrees that ASCAP and BMI are under. And in each instance, it instructs the judges who set those rates to look at a willing buyer, willing seller market rate standard. We had to approximate what the market would pay. It also, in terms of ASCAP and BMI's rate setting proceedings, it changes the way their judges are selected. Previously for proceedings, judges were appointed for life. Now, everybody believes it's more fair for them to be randomly selected proceeding by proceeding. It also eliminates the disastrous, and I use that word specifically, notice of intent program, which was administered by the US Copyright Office. I think we had about 60 million NOIs floating out there, and it just became completely inefficient. So in terms of the MLC, Danielle, it created the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So one of the first benefits is it's governed by songwriters and music publishers. So they oversee this entity. The MLC also resolves disputes and administers unclaimed royalties. So streaming companies pay all of the costs of the MLC. And so songwriters are going to get 100 cents out of the dollar. And I will insert here one of the things I'm absolutely the most excited about is among my own membership. I know there's a lot of songwriters that are posting stuff on streaming platforms, and it's easy enough for them to go choose an American Performing Rights Society and join that society for performance royalties. But a lot of them just don't bother with their mechanicals. Even if it's a few $100s, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to do it service by service, or you've got to hire somebody. When it comes to the MLC, all you have to do if you're the administrator of your own publishing is give us your data and you're going to get paid. And I'm really anxious to see what that looks like. I think we're going to see thousands of songwriters that probably never collected their mechanical royalties using the MLC.
So can I ask a question? There's definitely a change in, can you talk just for a moment about songwriters and how they're represented on the board and in the statutory committees? Because there's definitely a change in terms of involvement in governance that had not been really a factor previously.
And the board has functioned very well. The 5 largest U.S. publishers get a seat, as they should, because they represent the bulk of the activity that the MLC is overseeing. Small music publishers, 5 of them get a seat. And there's an election process, how they're chosen. And then we have 4 songwriters on the board of directors, and there's a process how they're chosen. There's a nominating process and an election process. Songwriters essentially are autonomous over choosing the songwriters and the publishers over the publishers. And on the committees, it's 50-50. So it's half songwriters and half music publishers. The chair of the MLC is Alisa, and the vice chair is the songwriter, Kevin Kadish. And so that's how that works. I will also mention there is what we believe a very fair and efficient process for distributing unclaimed funds. It's based on the streaming activity you have on that service during a given period of time. And those funds are distributed, we believe, much more equitably than they ever have been. And the database is transparent. It's a completely transparent database. And that represents a whole lot of improvements for the songwriters. And then I'll go back to something Kris said about the portal. The portal is going to empower songwriters, whether they are the administrator or not. They're going to be able to flag incorrect data, report it, and make sure they get paid. So there was a lot in the Music Modernization Act specifically centering around the mechanical licensing collective.
Alisa, the unmatched royalties that Bart referenced was a big reason why the collective was created and the MMA really moved forward. There was a lot of royalty revenue that was not making its way from the digital services to publishers and therefore songwriters. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of what the collective does with those unmatched royalties and how it changes the system to be more transparent?
Sure. So first of all, this does change the interactivity of publishers, songwriters, and DSPs. It really empowers publishers and songwriters to take control over this type of mechanical licensing in the United States. As everyone's mentioned, it is a free service to publishers and songwriters. Royalties are passed through with no charge. So that's the first part. And the second part is that publishers and songwriters who control and run the MLC collect 100% of all streaming revenue. It doesn't sit at the DSPs anymore and us have to go chase after it. It sits with the MLC for the MLC to make the distribution. The first part of that is that all distributions for matched works and ISRCs will be made. And as you mentioned, when we talk about the unmatched funds, the MLC has an obligation to continue to match and try again over several years, at a minimum of 3 years, to hold this revenue and continue to try to match the songs to the recordings to the revenue and pass it through the way it normally does in any instance. If after 3 years we look at the revenue and we say, it's been put up on a portal for people to claim and to and to say, this is my song, this is my recording, this should be my revenue, and it's been determined, and or there has not been any pass through, there is a committee, an unclaimed funds committee made up of songwriters and music publishers who will make suggestions to the board as to whether or not this money should be distributed out based on market share. The market share distributions to publishers, and this will not come easily, and this will not come quickly. Okay, so don't expect after the first 3 years, oh my God, there's going to instantly be this vast distribution of funds. It's going to take a lot of time and consideration for the committee and then for the board to make that determination, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure everything is matched as much as possible. When this distribution is made and the money is paid to the publishers based on market share, the publishers have an obligation to pay songwriters at a minimum 50% of the revenue collected. They may pay more based upon their contractual obligations, but at a minimum, songwriters get paid 50% of this unmatched revenue.
So, Alisa, one of the, sorry, I think I'm.
Nope, you're on mute.
Okay. One of the missions of the MLC is to ensure that as much of this ownership and usage are matched so that the proper people are paid. All of the tools are there. You talked about a public database that anyone can access, the potential for a portal that can allow for copyright owners to claim. But part of this is, as Kris likes to call it, playing your part. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the new role that publishers have to take on here, wherever you are for your US usage, to ensure that you are in fact playing your part and using these tools to make sure your works are matched?
Sure. So it is enormously important. Okay. For the first time, as I mentioned, we have the power. The publishers and the songwriters have the power. And part of that power includes obligation. So the portal, to be clear, the public portal will show income shares for people that are collecting mechanical revenue, not so much as ownership, but actually the distribution shares that they receive for the mechanical royalties. So I want to make sure that that's understood. The second part is that you should go in and check. You should check if you have one song or if you have a million songs. This is your opportunity now, before the portal gets up, to work with the MLC and the people within the MLC to make sure the right writers are shown, to make sure the right shares are shown, to make sure that the connections are made between the publishers and the songwriters, and also to the sound recordings. The MLC is working hard to make sure that we make that as easy as possible. A lot of the information that was there, that was taken from another database, because we couldn't do this from scratch. We had to start somewhere. So we started with a database that's frequently used in the United States that was controlled by HFA, and we've improved it. And we will continue to improve it, and it will change and fluctuate over time to become better. But I implore all music publishers and songwriters to make sure that they go into the portal now, before it's become public, where the public portal is shown, to try to update and make sure the information is as accurate as possible. Take the time. It's your investment.
So, Kris, this is a perfect segue into what the MLC is actually doing right now with the Data Quality Initiative. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how publishers and CMOs outside of the US can be involved in this to ensure their data is correct and work with you at the MLC. Oh, you're on mute. Wait, you're on mute, Kris. Sorry.
One thing I would add to just emphasize the point Alisa made, we have quite a lot of data already in our database, and we know, having looked at it, that we have a lot of data from foreign publishers, either provided directly or through one of the foreign mechanical organizations. So there is data there, and there's likely data for all of you. And the DQI, the Data Quality Initiative, allows you to compare portions of your data or all of your data with the data we have to see those discrepancies. And that process is really straightforward. We can run those reports in a matter of hours usually. They can accommodate any number of works from a couple of hundred to more than 1 million. So you could do just a general comparison of every work you control, or you could break it into catalogs. You could focus on particular writers. However you want to do that, the DQI will accommodate your strategy, but we can't tell whether, when there is a discrepancy, whether our data is right or yours is right. And that gets to the point that Alisa was saying. The premise of the MLC's database is that our members, by having full transparency, full visibility into the data for their musical works, will be able to ensure that that data is accurate. And we don't want to guess. We can't guess what's right or what's wrong. We need your help in confirming what's right or what's wrong. So that process is active and available today. You could do that even if you haven't yet set up your portal account. That DQI process right now lives outside the portal. So if you're interested in doing that and beginning to compare your data, please reach out to us through our website. Let us know. As I said, we've got well over 300 companies and individuals who've done this. And those participants range from the largest publishers to self-administered songwriters who have catalogs of 100 works. And we have seen it work equally well for all of them.
I just want to add, as a publisher, I'm in the weeds on this. So I go through the portal. I want to know how it works. I want to see how our songs look. It's important to us to get this right. The DQI was an amazing tool to show us the difference between what we had in our system based on CWR as compared to what was in the database system. Mergers that had to be made, songwriters that had to be added, shares that had to be fixed. And by no means was there an inordinate amount of things that needed to be improved. In fact, there was, it was relatively manageable. So there are improvements, but I don't want to give anybody the idea that this is like crazy, like that there isn't correct data. There's a ton of correct data out there. You'll know what's correct. You'll know what needs to be updated, but we strive to make sure that we have all of the accurate information.
So Kris, one of the questions that's come up is, how do you verify whose data set is correct, where there are conflicts, and where you're receiving data sets and sending back corrections? Maybe you can talk in a little bit more detail about how that works.
Sure. Again, the DQI allows you as a publisher or a self-administered writer to see where our data differs from yours. That doesn't change anything in our database. You have to then take the separate step of saying, okay, in that instance, the share that you have MLC is not right, and then submit a correction. You can do that directly in the portal. You can literally edit the work registration for a work in the portal. It's very easy to do. You hit submit, and then you'll see that change updated. And depending on the complexity of the changes, that can be, in a matter of hours, or it could be a few weeks. It just depends on the validation on our end. You can also do it through the traditional CWR process if you're a larger publisher using CWR. But you have to take that separate step to then tell us what needs to be fixed. So the DQI gives you the visibility, gives you sort of your task list. Here are the things that potentially I need to fix. And then you use the web interface or CWR to make those changes. There will also be an Excel template that you can use to upload within the portal if you want to make changes to your data via Excel. And that's sometimes a nice intermediate step for folks who don't want to do it work by work, but also don't want to deal with the complexities of CWR.
And so, yes, and I'll just to go a little bit further with that, and go back to the disputes situation. The MLC doesn't actually have the authority to resolve disputes. Disputes, to the extent that they come up, so if two publishers disagree over their shares, their splits, who owns a particular work, that still has to be resolved between the publishers or in a court of law here in the United States. The MLC sets policies about how disputes will be handled within the MLC, meaning how they handle the money during the pendency of the dispute, what they do with the money once a dispute is resolved and the parties come to them, but it itself is not resolving the disputes, just to be very clear about that, because that was another question. One of the other questions, Alisa, is somebody asked, does the MLC receive registrations? Can you maybe speak to that? Because they certainly have to register to become a member, but registrations are not going to be received by the MLC, right?
Right. Well, if you register to be a member, you have to be the party that is able to collect the mechanical income in the United States for the works. So once you've registered to become a member and your membership is accepted as you know, with financial documents and everything that goes along with that, then you are able to register all of your songs, whether it's in bulk or individually. Anybody that is not a member will have access to the public portal to see how songs are registered.
And then in terms of registration, that still goes to the Copyright Office. Your copyright.
Oh, we're talking about copyright registration, right? So there are a lot of registrations, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's a little confusing, because we're saying you should register with the MLC, but we don't mean copyright registration. We mean register as a member. Copyright registrations still have to go to the U.S. Copyright Office.
That's correct. Copyright registrations still happen at the U.S. Copyright Office. PRO registrations still happen at your performing rights organizations. And now mechanical registrations happen only in one place now in the United States, which is the MLC, as compared to before, where you could be sending it to a lot of different places.
Bart, this is an interesting question, because actually this was something that came up while we were negotiating the law, which is, you know, why did we decide that the unmatched, after 3 years, after, you know, a real effort to actually match those works and those royalties and pay it out, whatever is remaining, why did we decide to distribute that out to the industry? Why did we not decide to set it aside as a cultural fund or scholarships? It came up. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah,
but
it did. And look,
but we all actually decided to proceed in this way. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
Because it's songwriters' money. And I will get a little bit into the weeds here. So part of the grand compromise, while we and a digital service are looking for the owner of the song's getting paid in a line item. So part of what we want to do here is change the paradigm to empower songwriters. So we have already undertaken a Herculean effort to get the word out about the MLC. And we're just starting on that. We're going to have an ongoing process for years, but you've got to go look it up. If the songwriters empower themselves to make sure that we have their payment information right, they're going to get paid. But at the end of the day, the decision was made because it's the songwriters' money. And there were also members of Congress that felt strongly about that. So our job becomes now to find songwriters and to empower them to find out when they're owed money and to get their data right.
And I just to add to that, I mean, I think here in the US, for most of the history of Section 115, there was no way for self-published writers to really engage with any entity to ensure they were getting paid this money. The MLC's entire mission, part of its main mission, is to educate and outreach to this exact constituency of self-published writers who maybe have never received a mechanical payment before, but now have a way. And Kris, maybe you can speak. The portal was built to ensure that anyone at any level with any number of works can engage with it and make sure that they have their information in there. Even if you're sending your ownership information in a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, it can still work for you, right?
Yep. The portal is user friendly for the least knowledgeable and experienced user we can imagine. And I think to the broader point about outreach, we've been really intentional in thinking about how do we do that? How do we reach those self-administered songwriters who may not yet have had any engagement with the broader music industry? I often think about how when many of us were kids and we were playing music in high school, we were writing songs and recording music and it didn't go anywhere because there was no infrastructure. But today, an 18-year-old kid can write songs in their bedroom, record them on their computer, and have them up on a major service like a Spotify and Apple Music or an Amazon in a matter of hours. And they are now a part of that ecosystem, and their songs could be generating revenue. So as an example, we have a head of educational partnerships, Serona Elton. Her role is focused primarily on outreach to colleges that have music business programs, where so many aspiring members of our industry, whether it be on the creative side or the business side, start to pursue that dream. And we've released an educator toolkit so that any of the teachers teaching courses in those programs can quickly plug in information about the MLC into their curriculum to make sure that those aspiring songwriters, aspiring members of our industry understand how to connect with the MLC and what it will do for them. We have a head of third-party partnerships, Dave Ogan, who's focused on reaching out to technology companies and other companies that support the self-administered part of our ecosystem. And one of the things that we've done already is work with some of the independent music distributors that help creators get sound recordings up on those digital platforms to share the word about some of the self-administered songwriter webinars we've done. So essentially, we're going to the platforms that serve those self-administered creators and communicating with them through the platforms they're already using. That's another way that we can ensure we're getting the word out to those folks. Danielle?
I know we're just about out of time, but just very quickly, Kris, does a self-published writer have to do anything to qualify to join the MLC?
No, this is the easiest membership you can imagine. Essentially, if you have a song that you self-administer and it's available on a digital service, you can become a member of the MLC. I want to make that point. If you have 5 songs you've written that are still in your notebook and you've never actually recorded them, there's no need to register them yet and waste the time because there's obviously no revenue coming. But if you've written a song and it's been recorded by anyone, you or anyone else, and it's available on a digital audio service in the US, you can become a member of the MLC, set up the registration for that work, and then begin to collect revenue from us, mechanicals, to the extent that that song is streamed or downloaded.
Johnny, I think we're out of time. I'm going to hand it back to you, but perhaps if there are other questions that come up, you can send them our way after the fact, because I'm sure we'd be happy to answer them and then get them back to your members.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks very much indeed, Danielle. And a very big thank you to all of our panelists today, to Kris, Ahrend, to Barton, to Alisa.
And John, I would add our website is themlc.com.
Exactly, the with a capital T. So we've been sharing that for recent weeks and months. ICMP's got national associations in 54 different countries. It's a very widespread network, so we'll be continuing to echo the calls that have been made today. The word's pretty clear. Let's get the word out. Let's have international publishers contacting their sub-publishers in the US, songwriters contacting them via the portal, checking the website. It's a very cogent and clear and concise website in terms of practical guidance with all of this. And so we really advise you to check it out. We'll continue doing that over the coming weeks and months. But that just leaves me to say again, a very big thank you for bringing really the law to life. This is demonstrable change on behalf of songwriters and publishers. So bravo, thank you. And we look forward to working with you internationally as the weeks and months go. We're just going to highlight before we close our forthcoming events as part of the digital series. Today, of course, we've been speaking in our third episode on the MLC, but we have another coming up in just a couple of weeks. It's another very prominent topic for both in Europe, in the US, and in China, and that is the topic of artificial intelligence. It's obviously crucial to actually some of the topics we've been talking about today: registration, royalties, distributions, and all of the different ways in which digital music is distributed. So it's a crucial issue. We've got a fantastic panel so far. We have the lead rapporteur from the European Parliament, Mr. Ivan Garcia. He is writing the European Parliament's report on artificial intelligence. We work with him very closely, and he'll be speaking about what the EU is doing on the regulatory side. We also have Molly Steck, the attorney advisor from the US Patents and Trademarks Office, obviously a leading expert in copyright, who Danielle and the team worked very closely. She'll be speaking about what the US are doing in this particular area. We have Lucy Caswell, who's our general manager at the NMPA UK Trade Body Association. Lucy is very well versed in this area because currently the UK government is undergoing a consultation on the impact of artificial intelligence on the business. So 3 very well-placed speakers and a 4th to be confirmed in the coming days, giving an East Asian perspective as well. So do check in with us. That will be the 9th of December, 5 p.m. Central European time. We will circulate the usual promotional tweets. We will also communicate through our membership emails and the weekly wrap, which we send on a Friday. Just to say also that the video of today's digital series will also be circulated to ICMP members. And with that, a very big thank you from Brussels to everyone in the US and to everyone watching. Thank you, and we hope to see you next time.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.